Greetings one and all, Super Mondays, here in the Holy Land, the Holy Apple, and the Holy Hilltop, Tal Binyamin. We are on the first day of the new month of Shvat, the 11th month of the Jewish year, 5782. Once again, as always, a big thanks to our faithful cameraman. Whatever the weather might be, whatever the situation might be, sticks it out with us here. Okay, today's class, put on a seatbelt. From Bob Marley's Rivers of Babylon to Nissim Black's Ode to Brooklyn. From Bob Marley's Rivers of Babylon to Nissim Black's Ode to Brooklyn. Take it away. Now, at the beginning, I want to state this very clearly. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Nissim Black. I look up to him. There's a lot of great things that he does. But unfortunately here, he crossed a red line. So, once again, Nissim Black is a great person. I wish that, I was able to come up to the ankles of Nissim Black, but truth is truth, and when we cross a red line, doesn't matter what our name is, we have to be, not that we're called out, but the issue at hand. Nissim Black does not interest me or this class. It is the issue, singing a song about Brooklyn, singing about Brooklyn. So let's take it from the top. Many years ago, the great Bob Marley, even though it was not an original song of his, he did sing the song that existed already, On the Rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yeah, we wept, when we remembered Zion. Everybody, on the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yeah, we wept, when remembered Zion. No extra charge, folks. Yes, there the wicked carried us away in captivity. They required from us a song. Now how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Bob Marley, the non-Jew, singing about what? On the rivers of Babylon, of Psalms. How a Jew how can you sing when you are on a strange land? And unfortunately, we have this love song to Brooklyn by a religious Jew. Not only a religious Jew, a very, very high and lofty Jew. A Torah Jew. So, let's compare this to some of the words of the YouTube song Brooklyn. Hear our voice, it's our choice, it's Brooklyn. 2. So we celebrate this lovely place. We call it Brooklyn. 3. I'm so proud to be a Jew right here in Brooklyn. Proud to be a Jew in Brooklyn. Four, this is the little Brooklyn of mine. I mean, it's like personal. It's part of me. It's mine. 5, the joy of Brooklyn, spread it. If you gave me the world, I still choose Brooklyn. If he gave me the world, I still choose Brooklyn. Not Jerusalem, not the land of Israel, not the Shomron, not Judea, amazing. So, let's get down to it. Bob Marley and the rivers of Babylon. What was going on the rivers of Babylon? The Jewish people had just been, their temple had been destroyed. The first temple was destroyed after existing for 410 years. And it was destroyed, and the Jewish people would have to go to exile for 70 years. So they were leaving the land of Israel, and they reached the rivers of Babylon, or according to the way of the accent of Bob Marley, Babylon, whichever way you like it. So, the king of Babylonia was the wicked Nebuchadnezzar, and he sees that the Jewish people are sitting down, and he tells them, listen, you Levites, I want you to get ready, because just like you, I know that you guys know how to play, yeah, you know how to play the instruments, and you know how to sing. And I want you to, after we eat a little bit here, I want you to sing to our various idol worshiping here. Jewish people are freaking out. What? Not only have they destroyed the land of Israel, not only have they destroyed our temple, they've destroyed our souls. They want us to sing to their idol worshiping outside the land of Israel? No way, Ray. An amazing thing happened. They all bit off, cut off, injured their thumbs in order that they would no longer be able to play any instruments. Because how can we sing the songs of God when we are outside the land of Israel? How can we sing about Brooklyn? How does that work? So, in a very courageous act by the Levites, they just bit off their thumbs, or took off their thumbs. And an amazing piece of information that we're told. At the same time, where God saw this, that they were willing to handicap themselves for life. Imagine people, your whole life was music. You're Levites. You play musical instruments in the temple. That was your life. And you give it all up. Imagine how many people are willing to do that. And we had an entire tribe here of people that were willing to do that. God said, I'm with you. I'm in. I'm in with you. And every single day, 3 times a day, a Jew takes 3 steps back. And he says the words of God, I too will take my, so to speak, my finger back in pain to identify with your act. And every day we say, Hoshia yemincha va'aneni. Please, God, save your right hand. God, to identify with the actions, with the brave actions of the Levites, amazingly, also takes his finger back. And as long as the Jewish people, God says, as long as the Jewish people are in exile, as long as the Jewish people are suffering, I'm in with the suffering. I too, so to speak, am suffering. My hand, my finger is taken back. This could be found, folks, if you look it up in Psalms 137. Look it up in the Al Kuchimoni. It appears many, many places in the words of our sages. That is an amazing concept. That is a Torah concept. That's the way it should be looked at. And every day, 3 times a day, we're reminding God of the tremendous sacrifice that, first of all, the Levites had, and joining in to that, to a identification of pain that the Levites put themselves in. God is right there saying, how can we sing the songs? How can we sing the song of Brooklyn or any other exile other than songs praising the land of Israel, our homeland, the temple? Something is dead wrong here. Something is really wrong here. For generations, the Jews have composed songs. I'm going to share a few of them. Songs about yearning, love, adoring the land of Israel. Songs, poems, love songs. How did we get to Brooklyn? An amazing words of Rabbi Nachman of Breslev. Listen to this. It can be found in Likutei Moharan, in section volume 2, 63. He says, no, that when Jacob was visited by his son, they came back from Egypt to tell that they had to bring down Benjamin, or else they would not receive any food for their families back in the land of Israel. There was a famine in the land of Israel. Only in Egypt was their sustenance. So it says that Jacob sent down the 10 boys to Joseph, and he sent with them in Hebrew it's called the delicacy of the land of Israel, Zimrat Haaretz, the top of the top, the cream of the cream. But it also means song, and that's the take of Rabbi Nachman of Breslev. He says, what did Jacob send with his sons to Joseph? Bring to Joseph the songs of love, of yearning for the land of Israel. That's what Jacob sent with his sons. He didn't send the Jaffa oranges or the Jaffa grapefruits, or the great tomatoes in Israel that are grown. He sent the songs of yearning for the land of Israel to Joseph. That is a verse in Genesis 43. Check it out. And this is what he sent to Joseph. Were love songs, yearning for returning to the land of Israel by the 10 sons that were stuck in Egypt. So let's look at a few of the classic Jewish love songs that were composed to Jerusalem, to the temple, to the land of Israel over the ages. It says in the book of the Sefer Charedim, written by Rabbi Elazar Askari, he writes in the chapter 59, he says that every Jewish person has to muster up love for the land of Israel. And you have to yearn to come there from all parts of the world, like a son returning to their mother. Why? Why do we have to love? Why do we have to show so much yearning for the land of Israel? Why? Because we were, in the words of the Sefer Charedim, we were tossed out, we were exiled from the land of Israel because we despised the land of Israel. So therefore, the fixing of despising the land of Israel is a love, is a yearning to return. So therefore, throughout the ages, Jews sang poems love songs to the land of Israel, not to Brooklyn. So we have a song, it's called Eretz Kedosha. It was written by Rabbi Avraham Salama, Eretz HaKedosha, the Holy Land. The next song is I Love Your City. It was written by Rabbi Moshe Ashkar, the priest. It is so dear to me. I'm just reading the first line of the song. It is so beautiful to me. It is so loving to me. Your city, God. It's a land that brings upon me so much pleasure just to think about it. The beautiful, lovely center, Israel. This was written by Rabbi Zechariah Alchari. He was one of the leading rabbis of Yemen. He went and he met with Jewish giants, the Ramak and the Mabit. And he made up this song about the beauty of the land of Israel. Diamond, my diamond. This was a song composed by Rabbi Avram Dvik Klotzi. The land of Israel, you are like a diamond to me. And then a song, a love song, a yearning song by Rabbi Shmuel Yecheskel Ezra. My dear brother, where are you from? Oh, I am from the Holy Land. That's how the song begins. My dear brother, where are you from? I am from the Holy Land. The Holy Zohar says that every Jew is really from the land of Israel, but their soul was lost to the outside the land of Israel. So when they ask you where you're from, tell them you're from the land of Israel. A Jew, a true Jew, feels that he is from the land of Israel, not from Brooklyn or anywhere else. Next song, LeDavid Shir Umizmor. This was a song that was written in yearning for the city of Jerusalem. It was written by Rabbi Aaron Chassin. He was one of the greatest singers, composers in Morocco. He lived 200 years ago. And that's the song that he wrote. I wait for you day in and day out, Tiberias. This was written in honor of the city of Tiberias. It was written almost 300 years ago by the famous Rabbi Chaim Abulafia. And then the same idea, I yearn for you daily, Jerusalem. This was put together by an emissary to the land of Israel, a frequent flyer, I guess, to the land of Israel, before there were, of course, flights, from Morocco. And his name was Rabbi Eliyahu Chazan. I will praise you with thanksgiving, written by Rabbi Moshe Stahon in his book, Praising the Land of Israel. In this song there are 15 praises of the city of Hebron. The Ben Ish Chai, the famous Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim, El Eretz Chemda Tova, a good and plentiful land you are, the land of Israel, wrote a song. A A Beautiful View. That's the name of the song, by none other than the great Rabbi Yehudah Halevi. Let's look into a little bit about who this great Jew was, Rabbi Yehudah Halevi. First of all, he had a famous expression, I am in the far west, but my heart is in the east. He was outside the land of Israel, far away, in Spain, Toledo. However, my heart is always in Jerusalem. Rabbi Yehudah Halevi, he was born in Spain, Toledo, in the year 1075. When, approximately in the year 1140, he decided to move to the land of Israel. So he went up. And first, he arrived via ship, etc. He arrived in Egypt. And immediately, the Jewish community of Egypt, they understood what a great rabbi, what a great personality this Rabbi Yehudah Halevi was. And therefore they gathered around and they became his disciples and his students, and they begged him, please, and pleaded with him, please, Rabbi Yehudah Halevi, please stay with us and build up the Jewish community of Egypt. But of course, Rabbi Yehudah Halevi, who was always yearning to come to the land of Israel, said, I cannot stay with you here outside the land of Israel. And he came, and he arrived in the land of Israel. And when he was at the entrance to Jerusalem, he got down, and he crawled into the gate of Jerusalem as a sign of love, to crawl into the land of Israel. The earth of the land of Israel, of Jerusalem. And he got down on his hands and knees, and he crawled to show humility and love, and to hold the land close to his heart, the earth close to his heart. And unfortunately, one of the Muslims who saw his tremendous love that he was showing for the land of Israel, he could not take it. And he took his horse, this Muslim, and he ran and killed Rabbi Yehudah Halevi. He finally made it into the land of Israel, where he always yearned for. He finally made it here. And that minute, he was just trampled upon by an Arab on a horse, murdered. That is Rabbi Yehudah Halevi, and that is part of his song. Folks, if we look from above, we see that throughout the ages, from time immemorial, there has been a difficulty for the Jewish people connecting to the land of Israel. When we look at our history, our 4,000 years beginning from Abraham, we see that there's only been a minority of time that the Jewish community as a whole, as a nation, has been there. Of course, there are places where there was always a Jewish presence, true communities. However, as far as the nation goes, it was a limited amount of time that we were enjoyed being in the land of Israel. Why is the issue of being in the land of Israel, why is it so difficult? Why is it such a barricade for most of us throughout most of our history. Let's take it from the top. There is a tremendous principle in Judaism that is brought down in many, many books. It's brought down by Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen from Lublin and many others. They tell us, if you want to learn a principle about whatever in the Torah, always go to the beginning, to the first time that it's mentioned. If there's a word, if a word is mentioned for the first time, look, investigate, because there is a wealth of information from the source. The source is the first time. That is the foundation. If you want to understand the letters, the holy letters of the alphabet, you got to go to the first time that it is brought down in the Torah. Where is this letter the first time? And then you'll understand the essence, the root of this letter. So true with letters, with words, and concepts. So let's go to the beginning. The beginning experience of the land of Israel. Who was that? That, of course, was Abraham. Abraham, the first Jew. Abraham? Did Abraham have difficulty coming and settling in the land of Israel? Can this be? Abraham, the Jewish hero, the greatest of the greats. So Abraham lived approximately 3,900 years ago. The Holy Zohar Kadosh, in the book of Genesis, page 81, side A, says an amazing sentence. The Zohar writes that the reason that the Jewish people had to be subjugated and become slaves for 400 years in Egypt, you want to get this? Get a load of this one. The Zohar Kadosh says, I would never say it, but the Zohar Kadosh says, when Abraham took his family, because there was a famine in the land of Israel, and he did not stick it out, he did not have enough faith to stick it out in the land of Israel that everything will be, eventually will work out. When there was a lack of faith in Abraham, and he took Sarah with him down to Egypt, because of this lack of faith leaving the land of Israel, the Jewish people were punished. The descendants, the continuation of Abraham, us, we were punished, that we were enslaved by the Egyptians. So instead of Egypt becoming a place that saved us, it became a place that enslaved us. That's an amazing Zohar HaKadosh, black and white. And right now, as those of us that are religious out there, we all know that we're just getting into the book of Exodus. We're right there now. We're right there. So this is an amazing thing. Like, what the hell are we doing in Egypt? Usually there's some kind of transgression, but we don't necessarily find that. And the Zohar comes up and says, yes, there was something missing with Abraham. Once again, Abraham, he's on the top of the top, the pedestal of the pedestal. We're talking about microscopic sin for his level. But this is an amazing thing. We see that there is, according to the Zohar, our source of the land of Israel, Abraham, there was some difficulty here when it came to the land of Israel. And apparently, this has spilled over to generation after generation for 3,900 years. And it starts at the root, Abraham. Folks, if you think that Zohar is amazing, you ain't seen nothing yet. Comes the holy Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, a commentary, as a commentary on all of the Talmud. But on the tractate of Yevamot, if you go to the 6th chapter, if you look in the paragraph, the 12th paragraph, Rabbeinu Asher, he lived in Provence in the year 1210. An authority, a Jewish law authority of the Talmud, Rabbeinu Asher, the Rosh. And he says an amazing thing. He tells us, these are his words. I would never say this in a million years. I would never have the courage. I would be shaking to say this. But the Rosh said it and wrote it, black and white. That Abraham was lazy when it came to dwelling in the land and settling in the land of Israel. Lazy. Hitatzel. Check it out. It's right in front of you. Open up those tractates. Now, this was also brought down some 300 years later by the Yam Shel Shlomo in that book. Rabbi Shlomo Luria. He was in the year 1574 in Eastern Europe. The famous Marshal. And he writes the same idea and the same word that Abraham was lazy when it came to settling the land of Israel. Once again, I would never say such a thing, but it's right out there. That is an amazing thing. Now, what are they talking about? So, let's bring in the commentator on the Rosh. One of the commentators on the Rosh is called Korban Netanel. Korban Netanel was Rabbi Netanel Weil. He lived in Western Europe in the year 1769. So he tells us, he asked himself this question: how come these commentators, the Rosh or the Yam Shel Shlomo, how could they say that Abraham was lazy when it came to fulfilling the commandment of living in the land of Israel? How could they say that? And he says the following, amazing. We know, our sages tell us, that Abraham came to the land of Israel twice. He came when he was 70 years old. The first time that he was in the land of Israel when he was at the age of 70. And there God had the covenant between the halves, Brit Ben Abitarim. Don't know exactly how you translate that into to English. But anyways, Abraham was told that his future generations, descendants, would be subservient in a land not theirs, not under their control. This was at the age of 70. However, somehow Abraham returned to the area of Iraq. He left the land of Israel. What we see in the Torah, what I'm telling you right now about 7 years old, that is through the oral law. But what we see in the written law, we see very clearly that God commanded Abraham to come to the land of Israel at the age of 75. This could be found in the third portion of Genesis, Lech Lecha, at the beginning verses. So it says in black and white that he came again at the age of 75. So the Korban Netanel says an amazing thing, that we see here. Let's make order out of this. So twice Abraham comes into the land of Israel, once at the age of 70, leaves, comes back at the age of 75. Now, When he came at the age of 70, who did he come with? Did he come with all of his wealth? Did he come with all of his family, his wife, etc., and all of his disciples? No. So Korban Netanel tells us, and he proves this through the verses of the Torah. He tells us very simply that the first time that Abraham came to the land of Israel at the age of 70, this was with Lot, his nephew, but it was not with the entire family of Abraham, and it was not with all of his wealth that he had amassed. And then only 5 years later, why did he not bring all of his belongings and all of his wealth and his family? Because of the fact that he was kind of checking out the land of Israel. I guess today you would call it a pilot trip. Many people make when they come to Israel, or before they come to Israel, they make a pilot trip, which means that they check out if the situation in the land of Israel is appropriate for them, for their family. Do they have opportunity to find a job, housing, whatever it might be. Now, the Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler is very, very vehement about such pilot trips. Now, I imagine in his time there wasn't a something called a pilot trip, but it doesn't matter. Rabbi Dessler, in the end of his classic work, Michtam Eliyahu, Volume 4, at the end, there's different questions. So there's a question about coming to the land of Israel. And Rabbi Dessler says an amazing thing. Folks, open up your hearts. This is amazing. That those that come to search out if the land of Israel is appropriate for them, their families, usually those types of people find themselves shortly back where they came from. Only those that come and get rid of all their cheshbonot, they get rid of all of their pluses and minuses and all of their accounts that they're taking, whether I should come to Israel or not to come. When you get rid of all of these accounts, those people make it. Not the ones that come to search out the land to see if it's okay. If God made it a commandment to be in the land of Israel, we don't ask questions when it comes to putting on tefillin on our hands, and we don't ask questions when it comes to eating matzah on Passover. Actually, we do ask a lot of questions, but that's a whole different class. And that's the idea here. So that's an amazing point that Rabbi Dessler brings, that against this concept of checking out, there's nothing to check out. There's a commandment to live here. We live here. Like it, don't like it, that's tough luck. That's the way the ball bounces. So the Korban Netanel, this commentator, Rabbi Netanel Weil, is telling us an amazing thing. The first time that Abraham came, on purpose, he did not bring his entire family and his businesses, his wealth, because he wanted to check out the scene first. So this is why such commentators as the Rosh and the Yam Shel Shlomo use the word lazy. Only when he was 75, 5 years later, Abraham comes back with all of his family and with all of his wealth and business. Then he comes here, and he's here for good. He's here to live. Actually, wasn't here for good, according to the Nachmanides. Some months later, after the famine, then he left for a short period of time. Okay, but for general, he was here to stay. So folks, we see an amazing thing. Once again, remembering the holiness, and we're not anywhere near the level of Abraham. All that said is true, but with that said and done, the Torah teaches us by the microscopic falls of our forefathers and mothers. It teaches us lessons for ourselves to learn. Once we learn from our forefathers and mothers, it's not that we're bad-mouthing them, we're assisting them. Exactly opposite. When we learn from a person's mistakes, that person who made the mistake receives tremendous amount of reward for being able to be an educator for the Jewish people. So it's exactly the opposite. We're not Christians. We hide all the, the gory stuff, all the sins, all the falls. We're not Christians here. We're Jews. And the Torah and our sages do magnify, in order for us to learn, they do magnify various sins or shortcomings that our forefathers and mothers did have. Okay, let's take it a little bit further, and you'll have to not touch that dial for next week for our second part of from Bob Marley's Rivers of Babylon to Nissim Black's Ode to Brooklyn. Our next barrier, our next pitfall is Egypt. Once again, we're always looking, we're trying to discover, why has it been so difficult for Jews over the ages, over the centuries, to come and live and return, or to live in the land of Israel? And we have to go back to our foundation, to our source, to our root source. And we went back to Abraham. Abraham is an individual. But let's go back to the time where the Jewish people the concept of the Jewish people was being formed. And that was during the days of the enslavement in Egypt. So let's go down, Moses. Egypt occurred, the Exodus actually from Egypt occurred 3,334 years ago. So, one of the commentators, the Kli Yakar on the Torah, his name was Rabbi Shlomo Ephraim. He lived 404 years ago in Western Europe. He was a tremendous sage. And on the verse in Genesis 47, chapter 47, verse 27, he writes the following. I translate. This verse is a total accusation against the people of Israel. At the beginning, when the Jews came down to Egypt, they went down to Egypt with the intention of remaining strangers and temporary residents. That was the Jewish intention. We know how difficult it was for Jacob to come down. God had to, so to speak, twist his arm for him to come down to Egypt. It was so difficult. And we know that Jacob and Joseph wanted to strengthen the connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. So therefore they made sure that before they passed away, they told the Jewish community, they told their sons to relate the message over to the entire Jewish family nation. Tell them we want to be buried in the land of Israel, whether it's Jacob at the time of his death or hundreds of years later in the times with Joseph and the Exodus out of Egypt. This was the message. The message was, do not forget the direction. Our direction is the land of Israel. It ain't Brooklyn. It ain't Brooklyn or anywhere else in the exile. Our direction, as Rabbi Nachman said, everywhere I go, I'm going to the land of Israel. Rabbi Kahana would always say that if a Jew woke up in the exile in America, and the first thing, after saying, of course, thanking God for returning our souls, but after that, if the first thing a person would say, oh my God, this is awful, another day that I have to suffer living here in the exile. But we all know that that's not what's happening with most people. I don't want to give percentages. Those that understand, understand. Those that know, know. So, the Kli Yakar, in his commentator, he says, that was our intention. We are temporary here. We are strangers, and that's the way we choose to remain until we get back to where we're supposed to be heading to, and that's the land of Israel. However, the Kli Yakar says, however, this changed, and they settled so much, they became engraved so much in Egypt that God had to take the Jewish people out forcibly. And those that did not want to leave perished during the 3 days of darkness. We know that our sages in Yalkut Shimoni, in the portion of Bishalach, which is in Exodus, paragraph 227, we know that only 20%, one out of every 5 Jews, left Egypt. 1 out of 5 Jews left. The others perished and died in the 3 days of darkness left behind in Egypt. Last but not least, even after leaving Egypt, once again, only a minority left, 20%. The rest did not want to leave. They were so engraved in Egypt, pun intended. But not only that, we go out, we leave Egypt, and once again we send out 12 spies. Amazingly, the majority of spies, just like the majority of Jews, did not leave Egypt. They were killed because they preferred to stay in Egypt. So too, in the desert, 12 spies are sent to check out the land of Israel, even though there's no need to check out the land of Israel. But that's a whole class on its own. We spoke about there's no need. God tells Moses there's no need to check out the land of Israel. If it's a commandment, it's good. It's good for us. It's the proper thing to do. However, amazingly, the majority of spies, now that we left Egypt, and these are the good guys, these are the creme de la creme, these are the top. 10 out of 12 say, we're staying put. We're not going into the land of Israel. We're going to be wiped out. Amazing. Only 2, a minority, said, forward. Direction, the land of Israel. GPS, Waze, whatever you want, we're going. But the majority, even in the desert, died out. So, don't forget, come back with God's help. Next week, we'll be together for the finale part of our class. Blessings till then.